Hello, Professor. My name is Eric Wong, and I'm here to present the Week 1 video activity on the Introduction to Globalization. So the first question here states we want to identify our own definition of globalization, I guess on a personal note. And I'm very proud to state that upon graduating college, I was actually able to be employed by a large organization, well, fairly large, about 4,000 employees, that went through the entire globalization process in terms of marketing, brand, extending out to all the legal stakeholders, and essentially creating a system with, regardless what time zone you were in the world, that the company was making money. So my definition of globalization would be the process an organization goes through to understand customers' needs, legal ramifications, and any major stakeholders in order to extend and maximize revenue and market share. I know that's not 50 words, but the best way I can kind of relate to it, as I said, would be my own personal experience. So as I stated before, upon graduating college, I was employed by the largest clearinghouse in the world. They were stationed in Lower Manhattan. They were a company called DTCC, or Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. They're not really a big name brand company if you're not in the financial clearing services market, but anybody who's a big major player in the financial district or financial services, Merrill Lynch, Stock Exchange, Trump Tower, that Trump's building was essentially our neighbor around the corner. We share the same building as the S&P or the Standard & Poor's group that publishes the S&P 500 of all the best stocks that are out. So we were with a good company of some big names. Essentially, after the 2008 crisis or housing market crisis, President Obama passed an act. I believe it was called the Consumer Protection Act of 2012 or 2010. I don't recall exactly what the year was, but it really put a big foothold and made a lot of stringent rules and created a lot of stringent parameters in the way money moved in and out of the financial exchanges, of America. And I guess, once they were able to get that down pat, the organization I was employed with seeked out other, financial intermediaries and other financial markets, particularly in Europe and Asia, to set foothold in to provide clearing services. So essentially a clearing service in a layman's terms would be if I was to sell stock to another person, if I was to sell, say, 1,000 shares worth $10,000 each, just throwing numbers out there, it would have to go through obviously stockbroker or some kind of exchange like E-Trade or third-party carrier, but also a clearing service would have to be in the middle, kind of as a middleman to stamp off and say, this transaction is approved, this transaction is approved, this transaction is approved. So it kind of reduces the risk of money laundering and any falsified, illegal activity that would be going on and out before, the 2008 crisis and things of that nature. Just to give you an idea of the kind of, role that I played, I was employed as a data center engineer, a data center facilities engineer. So I was responsible for upkeeping the data center at my organization. So just that they would say in about a day, about a few $1 billion were processed and about 1 million transactions an hour. So you can kind of get the magnitude and get the idea of, the kind of business that we were pushing that had a really large impact on the outside world. It wasn't as simple as selling ice cream cones at the corner store against anyone that sells ice cream cones. And as I said, once we were able to extend out to the other countries and the other potential markets that were available, we were able to help set up a worldwide repository or a trade, understanding that regardless of what country you were in and where you were moving the money to, our organization had some kind of foothold and stakehold to stamp off and approve, clearing services. So if you wanted to move money from Germany to France, you'd have to go through us. You want to move money from England to United States to China, China back to the United States, China to Japan, you're going more than likely through our organization as a third party to stamp off and approve. And we would charge a small fee for each of those transactions. But as I said before, about 1 million transactions an hour, a few $1 billion a day, times, let's say, 250 working days a year, times 20 sites worldwide, you can kind of see the amount of money that we were able to generate on a yearly basis. I know from a theoretical standpoint, there's a lot of debates, referenced in the textbook on what is globalization, whether or not it exists or not. And I'm going to have to say it does, for the simple fact of the implementation of widespread, communication, social media, and technology that's available to pass on information and data. The game is just not the same anymore. I've read numerous articles that stated in the last 7 years, 90% of the world's data has been formulated and created. So it's even in 20 years ago, when Google was readily available, it still doesn't operate to the same capacity as now with all this data that's really available that companies are just trying to jump on to help maximize, their market share. And with that being said, I would say that the competition on a global scale has been much more intense in compared to previous decades. The textbook references in Chapter 2 that the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, or the quote-unquote Iron Curtain, removed the divide of the capitalist society, which is what globalization thrives on. For it's a common society where they want to keep everybody the same, and there's no, intuition or no initiative, and everyone's just kind of treated like a sheep in a barn, per se. I'm going to also say that globalization exists, simple fact that, a lot of these critics referenced in Chapter 2 are stating, well, globalization has always been around from the Marco Polo days, Marco Polo riding the Silk Road to China, and, the global spice trade in the Caribbeans, or the medieval times, the Romans having their gold route collecting taxes. You can't, in my opinion, compare globalization from the respect of medieval times and BC to now. I would say it's very, synonymous with trying to compare a soldier or warrior from the gunpowder area to the non-gunpowder area. You can't really compare a knight in shining armor in England from the 1400s that might be in a Braveheart movie, versus the average United States Marine who's armed with like an M16. It's just really two different parallels. It's not really apples and oranges. As I said, the readiness and the availability of technology and information that's accessible to all these, multinational corporations. We're all essentially looking to globalize. It's just essentially, as I said, change the game. I mean, even look at a company like Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts, there's just simple product, a cup of coffee, and with some brownies and donuts on the side. They reached market shares and extended their market and their brand into China, Europe, and the other developing country, Middle East, Australia. As any company essentially that's creating a product would always try to master the regional market share and the customer needs before, extending out into an international, marketplace. I'm sure BMW, when they were in Germany and they were, manufacturing their model, I'm sure they tested it out with the German market before heading it out to the United States market, which I would say is more likely the larger market just to do the capacity. So I know I'm running on almost 8 minutes, so I'll try to, cut it short. I know the textbook also references, going back to Chapter 1, on extensive and intensive properties, which I also think is very important in globalization, how you're able to incorporate both. It is possible to incorporate both. Some people might say it's not, and I think a good example is a company like Facebook, which is a social media company. Again, social media, very big and very, influential on globalization. So on the extensive side, they have a large capacity, a large volume, 3 billion users. Anyone with a computer or access to a portable electrical device would more than likely have a Facebook account. And on an intensive side, as I said before, social media is a large way in which companies are able to market their products, and a large way for other consumers to get information on products they might be interested in. So as I said, on that end, Facebook is able to successfully implement both the extensive, and intensive side, of their global products. So again, I am running off on almost 10 minutes. I think my clock says 9 minutes right now. So as I stated before, I recently, was employed, fortunately, by a company that went through the process of globalization. I'm currently working at an energy distribution organization, which is currently regionalizing the market share, respectively, in New York State. And we are also purchasing and acquiring assets nationally. And the way it's going and the trend and current trajectory of our company, I can't see us not globalizing within the next 10 years. As I said, once we master all the customers' needs and stakeholders and the entire process of how to essentially gain a large market share within the United States, there's no reason why we can't, extend our brand out to the other international sites. Because I mean, the process, the approach would be the same, but just rules are different. You can't say selling energy in China is the same as selling in the United States. I'm sure selling a cup of Dunkin' Donuts is not the same as selling in China or Europe as it is with the United States. But as long as you know what the process, what steps you are, what bottlenecks you might encounter, what challenges you are, what reserves and what alternative routes you need to take, it's really, as I said, just kind of going through the motions at that point. So at this point, as I said, I'm over 10 minutes. I know you have probably a lot of other students that you need to tend to and grade, so I will end this video post here. I hope you enjoyed it. Please feel free to review and comment. Obviously, you're the professor. I would love to learn, what I did well, what I didn't do well, and just to continuously improve. So I look forward to talking with you more. Thanks.